What's up guys, Tim Little. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin. Today's video we are talking about late summer crankbait fishing. Deep cranks, shallow cranks. Let's go. So about a month ago, I did a complete in-depth summer crankbait video. I talked about Magnum cranks, you know, your 6XDs, 10XDs, the Azuma. Yeah, I talked about everything from Magnum deep cranks all the way down to little square bills. Summertime is an amazing time to throw a crankbait. Late summer can be even better, and here's why. If you've been paying attention, at least where we are at in the country, the overnight temps, the air temps have been dropping. In fact, our water temp here has dropped about 7 degrees here in the last couple weeks. So those of you guys have been following the channel know that that means that fall transition, and it's all about bait fish. So this time of the year, even though I still do have these guys tied on, you know, your deep, real deep Magnum deep cranks, I start to transition to the more just deep diving cranks, and then the shallow cranks. Cranks that I can actually physically fish faster. Here's why. It's all about the bait. Those of you guys have been fishing for a while, or that have watched the channel for a while, know that in this kind of fall transition, those fish really start feeding up. The bait balls really start grouping up, and those fish are all about finding those bait balls. So you want to be able to cover a lot of water. In that previous video, I was talking about these Magnum cranks because you're getting these things down there deeper than we have been able to in years past, right? 20 to 25 foot, throwing a crankbait down there, just dredging bottom, fishing the ledges, fishing those main lake points, the key pieces of structure on those areas, trying to trigger those fish that are staged up on that structure. Well, now those fish are moving. They're hunting, they're following the bait, and the bass will also congregate more. They're going to get into these wolf packs, and that is why I like to cover water quicker and just kind of run and gun. And it's really hard to do that when you're down there just dredging with a big old shovel down there, right? So even though I still have those tied on, they still come into play if I find that key piece of structure on a main lake point with bait and fish. But more often than not, for me, I transition. Now the deepest crank I'm going to be throwing is like a DT20 or a 16 or a 6XD, because I can throw these on a 7-8 to 1 gear ratio reel and really just cover water. It's all about finding the active schools, the active bass on the bait fish, and then we also know where these fish are going. The shallow fish are going to congregate, and they're going to kind of herd the bait fish into the backs of bays, and that's really where the shallow cranks come into play. So, like I said, about a month ago, I did a complete in-depth video on everything crankbaits, square bills, all the way up to your Magnum deep divers, and a lot of that information still, well, it's all accurate, but it still kind of comes into play. But just start thinking about putting down the Magnum deep cranks and switching back to your more standard deep cranks and then your shallow cranks. So that's what I want to kind of talk about today, is even simplifying it even more for you. So we talked about the whole summertime cranks. Now we're talking about moving forward into the fall, that late summer, early fall transition on the crank, because like I said, it's all about the bait fish, and you can't cover nearly as much water when you're down there throwing a Magnum crank. There's that 6XD with that, compared to that Big M by Megabass. This is a great bait. But now is time to cover water. So, simplifying it even more, I got like 4 deep cranks I'm gonna throw at you. Number 1 is gonna still be that 6XD. That's just a tried and true crankbait. Again, it's all about speed. It's all about covering water and finding active fish. This time of year, if I pull up to a spot, you know, I got a waypoint or I have a key piece of structure that I want to fish, I'm gonna either idle it, maybe I already have it waypointed, I'm gonna fish it first, but maybe I don't. Maybe I'm idling a new lake and I find, you know, a nice long tapering point that kind of leads to the back of a creek arm or something like that. I'm gonna idle it with my side imaging. I'm gonna look for bait, I'm gonna look for fish. If I see that, I'm gonna turn around, drop trolling motor, and then I'm gonna start just burning this thing down there. You guys know why we like crankbaits so much. Those of you guys that don't, a crankbait is one of those baits that can really trigger a bite, really trigger a fish to eat, even if it's not in a hunting or eating mood. It's that you just tie into that core wiring, that core feeding reaction bite, right, of a bass with a crankbait. When you get this thing down there dredging and deflecting and changing directions, sometimes those bass just have to eat it even if they don't want to. So a crankbait down there on those key pieces of structure, main leg points with bait around it, can be money. But again, that 6XD, it's true, it dives deep, it stays down, and you can burn it really quickly. The DT16 or 20, did a little video on this one a few weeks ago, actually using the Mega Live, watching this crankbait get down to 20, pausing it, letting that thing sit there. It's not a real high float, and it was really hitting 20 foot. That's one of the coolest things now with the forward-facing sonar. You can really see if that DD22 is hitting 22 foot or if it's only hitting 16 foot, you know, and that DT20 is a great bait. The DT16 is another one of my favorites. And then last but not least, our tactical crank. You guys know that we designed this bait to be a cold water crankbait, but it has really come to shine in the warm water months as well. But again, look how cool that's a ghost kind of a back with some real chrome cheeks, real chrome sides on it, adding a little bit of extra flash. You guys have heard it for years. Burn, 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 pause. Let those fish just come out and just come unglued and hammer that crank. Again, their metabolism is up, the water temps are down, and they are looking to feed up. So a crankbait right now is a must. I'll throw in a fourth just because I have it here with me. That's that Norman, that DD22. That is just have a lot of history with that bait. Like I said, I've talked about it in previous videos, maybe even that last crankbait video, but it's a fairly inexpensive bait in the category, and it catches big ones too. So those 4. Same thing. Well, there's the here's the DD22, the DT20. That's about as deep of crank as I will throw going into the fall. Again, like I said, it's all about speed. The bigger bill that you put on the bait really slows it down. You can still burn them, but you're gonna burn out your elbow and your shoulder after a long day of cranking. That's why I kind of transitioned to those smaller, easier crankbaits to throw. So the same information applies to the shallow fish. And for me personally, this is where I really key in on the square bills, the shallow running crankbaits. Again, these fish that are shallow, you know, the ones that have stayed shallow all summer, you know, your frog eaters, your flip pitch punch fish, those fish have stayed shallow all summer. Now it's all about the bait, it's all about grass lines, and it's all about covering water and finding where those fish are in those grass lines. A square bill is great because you can cover a lot of water. It deflects very, very well. And if you're throwing the right depth crankbait, you can come over the tops of the grass, and that is key too. So I touched on them a little bit in that previous video, but now for me, going into that late summer into early fall, I find myself throwing more and more square bills, going after those shallow fish because as the water temps drop, maybe your lake levels are dropping, the water's kind of receding a little bit, you get the grass die-offs, and it becomes easier and easier to see the grass lanes, the edge of the grass, and you can take that square bill and you can fire it out there, and you can just burn this thing. Again, burn, 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 pause. Always add some kind of change in your cadence to get those fish to react. But you can fish this thing super shallow, less than 5 foot, 4 foot, sometimes 3 foot, depending on how big of a line you run. But again, it's all about speed. It's all about that grass up shallow. Now, I like to break my shallow crankbaits into 2 categories, rattling and non-rattling. Silent. This is the biggie. Real wide, aggressive thump, real loud one knocker sound. That's a bait to cover a lot of water. It's got some flash. This is that abalone shad color. Look how pretty that thing is. You guys will notice in all of these crankbaits that I've held up, I keep it fairly simple. I go with some kind of ghosty shad baitfish color, some kind of white or chartreuse, and then craw. Really, really simple. 3 basic color ways, color patterns. That abalone shad fits right in there with that ghosty kind of baitfish color. But again, it's all about speed. It's all about covering water and finding those active fish. You know, some of you guys that have been on an awesome topwater bite, you've seen maybe that kind of slow a little bit. Go subsurface, throw a little square bill around the same areas, and you guys will find that some of those fish are gonna eat that square bill better than blowing up on your topwater bait. So, key square bills for me. We'll talk about the rattling real quick. That biggie by River to Sea, again, that's just a must. It's a staple in our arsenal. Great sound, great action, deflects really, really well. It's a sweet little combo right there. One I haven't talked about recently, but it's that Jabberjaw by 13 Fishing. It's got kind of a rattle. It's a little different because the bait itself is fairly quiet, but that bill that rattles back and forth creates a lot of sound. And then the speed trap. Did I bring one? A speed trap is a fairly inexpensive bait. It's I think I forgot him. It's a real high pitch rattle, almost like a lipless crankbait sound. That thing comes through grass really, really well. And it's an awesome, shallow, quick speed trap, right? Quick burning bait. Again, same thing, kind of the same thought process with being able to move these baits, the deeper diving cranks, fast. Same thing with the square bills. This time of the year, with the water temps dropping, those fish are like, yeah, it's, you know, they just went through the hottest water temps of the entire year. Now they're starting to drop, they're getting comfortable. The fish really get active into fall, and they are willing to chase down a shallow running square bill and munch it. So the speed trap is great. Then the other ones I really like to throw, I'll save this one for last. I'm gonna go with like a 1.5, either the Strike King or the Lucky Craft. It's a silent bait. I really like silent baits for catching bigger fish. If I'm trying to figure out where the fish are, say I'm in a backwater, I'm gonna fish that biggie. Something with a rattle, something like the speed trap, something that has a lot of sound to kind of steer me in the right direction. I'm gonna call fish from a lot larger distance with that rattle. And then once I kind of figure out what the pattern is, maybe they're on a certain type of grass or they're on a certain, whatever the pattern is, then I will switch over to a silent shallow running crankbait, square bill, and that's typically where I get my bigger fish. Kind of sneaks up on the fish. They don't hear it coming from a long distance, and when you burn this thing by it and pause them, or it deflects off a piece of grass or piece of wood, they just have to eat. And that's usually when I catch the biggest square bill fish, is when I'm throwing the silent guy. So the 1.5, either the Strike King or the Lucky Craft, those are great baits. Again, American shad, awesome color right there. As far as hooks, you see right here, I have some Gamakatsu EWGs on there. I typically throw 2 hooks. I will throw a round bend, like an Owner ST36, if the fish are kind of slashing at the bait. Same thing applies to my deep cranks, my jerk baits. If the fish are just kind of swiping at the bait, with that open round bend, they get the hook better. But if they're straight choking it, or you're throwing the right color, they're eating it really well, go to that EWG. It kind of has that kinked in hook point, and that's gonna keep those fish pegged a little bit better than the round bends. But a little hook tip for you. So EWGs and round bends are the 2 style hooks that that I like to throw on my crankbaits. So last but not least, the ultra shallow guy. This is the Spro. This is the Fat John 50. Talked about this in a couple recent videos, but this is an ultra shallow running square bill. So that instance that I was talking about earlier with the water receding, or maybe the grass is dying off, and you get a little bit of difference, a little bit of depth between the top of the surface and the top of the grass. So say you have a foot or 18 inches, you can take this little guy. I'm throwing it and bait's jumping out all over the place. I can take this guy and burn it, pop it through the grass, get real active with it, but I can come over and tick the tops of the grass. Just got bit right there. A little bluegill bit me. But I can throw this thing over the tops of the grass, and that is key. That's something that it's pretty special. Finding a crankbait that runs shallow enough to get over the tops of the grass and just barely tick it. If you do get hung up, pop it free, and 9 times out of 10, that's when you're gonna get your reaction strike. But just burning this thing, getting real aggressive with it. It too is another silent bait. But this guy right here, if you're going after the shad eaters, the bluegill eaters, up in that shallow grass, that is a must. So there it is, guys, simplifying late summer crankbaits even more. Again, I always have at least one of the magnums with me. Just the deep, ultra diving deep cranks, because you might come across that specific piece of cover or structure, something that those fish are hiding in, ambushing from down in a depth that you want to reach. But I'm not going to have 5 or 6 tied on like I would, 3, 4, 5 weeks ago. Like I said, now I'm transitioning into having more of these guys tied on and more of the shallow cranks tied on. Another bait, as I'm talking about this, another bait that now starts kind of coming back into play is going to be your lipless crankbaits, that you can apply that to your shallow water fish. Either you're burning and ripping through the grass, or you're doing that hopping technique. But now that we're getting back into that colder water temps, I start to transition back into the lipless cranks. But guys, there it is, simplifying late summer crankbaits. Again, it is fun. The fish are getting active with the lower water temps. Pay attention to your overnight lows, and you will see that your lake's water temps are going to start dropping just a little bit, and those fish are going to get more and more active. Guys, if you have any questions, please leave those down below in the comment section. I will try to get to those as soon as possible. As always, guys, we appreciate the support. If you like this video or learned something from this video, please give us a like, hit that subscribe button, and we will see you guys on the next video.